Welcome, Domo fans from across the nation. We got to see a few of you in the intro. Atlanta, Georgia, Gilbert, Arizona, Northern Michigan, Rochester, New York. I had to privately message Dan and say, don't look now. There's almost 100 people on this stream before we even get started. It's exciting. I don't want to give too much away, but Dan has what we feel is the perfect session for this group, a hands-on deep dive into all these really crazy cool things that he does. Now, we started some of these sessions with Dan a month ago, right, Dan? And we called them technical adoption programs. We called them TAPS. As you may have seen, we've got a new name, correct?
We do. We love our acronyms here, but we're going with ACE, and it's going to stand the test of time.
I like it. As a maverick in the personality traits department, I appreciate the ACE. Like you said, we love our acronyms, the ACE acronym. All right, so we'll let me get out of the way as quickly as possible so Dan can dive into the session. Dan, it's always a pleasure joining you. You've got a great background as always. We've got the mountains there, a little snow cap. Just excited to not only see your face, but to see what you have to share today.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. I'm excited about this one. I don't know who had a chance to watch the little intro video I put together, but 3 degrees Fahrenheit. I was thinking it was, what do we got? We got 47 out there. We need some of that colder temps so the snow sticks. But if you had a chance to watch the little intro video, I noticed I've worked with a lot of you guys continually using the same pattern to solve some really cool challenges and problems. And so I thought we'd just get hands-on and knock it out together and bring it to you guys. I can't take all the credit for it. I got to give a shout out to, if any of you know Manya Doobie. Manya kind of sent me down this path. She wrote the code that's the foundation for what we're going to look at. So kudos to you, Manya. She's in our consulting department, but yeah, we're excited to show it to you.
Awesome. All right, Dan, I'll get out of the way. I'll let you share your screen. As always, if you have any questions, comments, moans, gripes, anything that you'd like that Dan to interact with, please utilize the chat. Tons of you are joining on our StreamYard page, but if you're joining on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, you can utilize the chat functions on those pages as well to collaborate with us. We would love to have you and would love to interact with you during this session. Like I said, hundreds of people joining now. Fantastic time. So Mr. Ace himself, Dan Hendrickson, take it away, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. And I know we hit on ACE. We didn't clarify what it is. It stands for Advanced Customer Enablement. We're going to do a lot of it. You're going to hear about it from your account teams. We're really excited about it, but forgive the name change there. But today we're going to talk about this pattern that I've seen in Power Work Lists, annotations on data, approvals, and a whole lot more. And I think you're really going to like it. And we're going to go hands-on. So real quickly, our agenda, we're going to discuss kind of the business challenge at hand. I'm going to give you a really quick demo. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about the architecture because that's a really important part here. And then I think it's going to take us about 20 or 25 minutes to get this thing built and deployed in your environment. And then we're going to talk about some takeaways and what's next. So the business challenge that we're looking at, right, and we encounter this all the time, is often folks will have a table like this. This is the actual data we're going to work with. And they just want to be able to simply update some values, right? I want to change the priority from high to medium. I want to change the progress from 50 to 90, or you want to enrich it with new data points, right? I may want to add a note, or I may want to say, like we'll do today, it's approved, it's denied, it needs more information. And we run into this a lot, but it can be challenging, right? Because your data lives in a system somewhere. It's in Domo, it's in a cloud data warehouse. Your users don't necessarily have access to update that, and you don't necessarily want to store these data points there. And so we'll show you how we do that. I'm going to jump in here now. We'll do a quick product demo. Let me stop sharing that screen and let me share another one. Let's do this. Maybe? Okay, here we go. So this first example that I'll show you and we've got a few that we're going to run through, is all centered around creating some annotations on data. And I want to show you kind of how fast this happens. There is an approval component to this one, but that's not what I really want us to focus on. I'm going to put just some additional data points in here. We're going to say we're going to give a $1,000 discount for fleet price plan, and I'm just going to say fleet customer. This was a customer of ours in the automotive space that I helped with this one. But I want to point out a couple of things. You'll notice without me doing anything, it was super fast, right? And we see down here 20999 Volkswagen submitted for approval is the status, right? So we saw the status immediately change. It's no longer editable, which is pretty cool. And in this case, not only did we update the data to say that it's been submitted for approval and annotate it with these new data points, this one actually does involve a workflow that includes some additional actions, right? If I come over here in my discount approval queue, you can see that here is a request for approval to do this discount. I'm going to go ahead and approve it. I'm going to say good job, whatever we want to do there. And just like we saw before, when it was really fast saying it was submitted for approval, you'll see, again, without me doing anything, our data set updates, and we can see that that request is now approved, right? Super cool, super fast, lots of different things that we can do with this. One other one that I want to show you really quick. This is an example. I really like this because this is just allowing us to not add new data points, but edit existing ones, right? I've got this data set. It's got project ID, project name, completion date, priority, and progress. This is one of those examples where I want to change one, right? So let's look at Viva right here. We'll grab this one and we'll change the priority to low, and we'll set the status to 90%. I'm going to go ahead and select that one, and I'm going to hit submit to update it. Now, what this one's doing is a little bit different than the last one. This is kicking off a data flow, right? And I'll show you really quick what this data flow does. This takes some data that's federated via Cloud Amplifier from Snowflake. It joins it up with the data that we just entered into that form, and it outputs it back in Snowflake. So the end result here, if we come and we find the record for Viva, I think it was, bear with me here. Yeah, Viva, we set to low and 90%. If we look here, we can see Viva is now low and 90%. And it's really just that fast, right? If we look at Biodex, waterproof and caulking, I'm in Snowflake now for clarity. We can see that it's medium and not set. If I come over here to my data, Biodex medium needs updating. I'm going to say it's high. It's 10%. And let's do tree flex also. Let's make that low. Let's make that 20%, right? So I can do multiples of these at a time. And again, that's going to kick off our data flow process here. Look at that. We can see that the data flow just ran. And if we come over here and we look at, it was Biodex and TreeFlex. Let's refresh this really quick. We can see that our new updated values are there, which is very cool. So it's super fast. And there's a lot of neat things and neat application that we see for this pattern, right? So I'm going to bounce back to the PowerPoint here really quick, and I'm going to walk you through this architecture, and then we're going to get hands-on. Eddie, as always, if people are asking questions, I'm not watching for those, so keep me on top of that.
Yeah, I got you.
Think about it. Okay, thank you. If we think about how it works, right? Obviously, we have our interface, right? This is an app. We are going to play around with some pro code today, but we're going to make it easy for you, I promise. So we have our app interface, and this is where users input data, right? And this is what we're going to build together in a minute. But let's talk about what does the app do, right? What the app does is we capture that user input, right? You saw this here, just like we can see in this work order 53682 for Yendel. And what the app does is it writes that data to AppDB, right? If you're unfamiliar with AppDB, it's a very powerful NoSQL data store that we have inside of Domo. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on that particular record right there, and we can see that it grabbed the SOW number, the make, the name, all the data, as well as the user input data, and it stored that in AppDB. What the app also does is it tells AppDB, hey, I want you to persist this to a data set, right? So we can see down here, 53682, Mercury for Yendal. We have that user input data, as well as the data that already existed in that data set in our new AppDB data set, right? So if we think about our card, right, our app, where's the data, right? This scenario I just talked you through, we've got this live point of sale data. We've got this AppDB data, and how do I get all of that in one card and get it so quick, right? You noticed that this, like within a second or two of me hitting submit, my app updated and it reflected the change in the data. And the way that we do that is harnessing dataset views. If you haven't had a chance to play around with dataset views, you absolutely need to. They are non-materialized representations of your data, and they can do things like include joins, calculated fields, right at the dataset level, right? So what we're going to do today, and what we did in this app, is we had our app or our card powered by that dataset view. That dataset view, writes data to AppDB, and then that is updated in our view. So if you've got additional steps required, like that example I showed of the work order discount approval, you can have this app. There's a little flag that we can turn on inside of there. I'll show you how to do that. That says, hey, I want you to write it to AppDB, and I want you to kick off a workflow, right? That's that work order discount approval demo that you saw incorporates a workflow in the process, and that workflow behind the scenes interfaces with the AppDB data, right? So when I went in and said, hey, we're going to go ahead and approve this discount and put a note of good job, that workflow updated the content in AppDB, which again, the reason it was so fast and we immediately saw it show up as approved in our app asset was because it's powered by a view, and that view is a real-time representation of the data. So in the second example we looked at with Cloud Amplifier, it's the same thing, right? We've got some Cloud Amplified data. In that case, it was live data from Snowflake. We're visualizing that data in our app, and we have the app take the user input, write it to AppDB. As we described, that AppDB data set makes its way to a normal traditional Domo data set. It's materialized in a tabular view, which kicks off an ETL, which runs in Snowflake and writes the output to Snowflake. And we end up with this nice circular round trip of the data. And as we saw, that works not just in Domo, but wherever you happen to have your data residing. So with that explanation out of the way, I hope that makes sense. What I would love to do is I want y'all to roll up your sleeves and get ready. We're going to build this thing together, and we're going to do it right now. Let me switch my screen share here. Stop sharing my screen. And what I'm going to do, we'll hop out of PowerPoint here. Bear with me for just a second. I am going to log into a brand new instance that we haven't done any of this in yet. If those of you that work in lots of different Domo instances, you can probably relate to some of the cookie challenges I'm trying to avoid here. So I'm going to just log into my personal instance, which has got as much context around this as your instance does, and we're going to knock it out together. So let's share out this window here, and we are going to log into Domo. So the first thing that I'm going to have you do, if you could please follow along with me, is head to the data center. what we're going to have you do so that we can all work off of the same data set for now, I'm going to have you hit connect data, search for connectors, and search for Domo dimensions. We've got this Domo dimensions connector. Now, I will tell you now, if you feel like you're a proficient developer, you feel comfortable in code, feel free to attempt to, in real time, wire it up to your own data. For those of you that you're like me and that ground might be a little bit shaky, following along with the data exactly as we're representing it will make things a little bit easier. But the file that we're going to grab from this Domo Dimensions data set is called ACE Webinar Sample Project Data.csv. So we're going to go ahead and grab that. We're going to hit next, and we're going to give it a name. I'm going to call it sample data for webinar. Very creative, I know. So we've got our sample data for webinar, and we'll give that just a second to import. There you go. We can see that we've got 300 records, 9 columns that represents our fictitious project data, right? What we're going to do in this example is we're going to build out that app, and we're going to allow the users to review those projects, approve them or deny them, and then add a note, right? So we're going to keep it simple. There's so many applications for this. I think it'll all click together, but we've got our data set. And what I'm going to have you do now is click the More menu and go to the Asset Library. You'll see that right there. If you are new to using Pro Code apps in Domo, the Asset Library may be a new thing to you. If you're not, then obviously you're familiar with this. But in the Asset Library, up in the upper right-hand corner is this Pro Code Editor button. I'm going to have you click on that button, and it's going to load some getting started examples and then some app templates. In this little search bar, I'm going to have you search for the word data-table. Again, got real creative in the naming convention here. Don't hold it against me. But we're going to choose that template. We're going to get a little pop-up. Again, more creativity, app for webinar. You can call it whatever you want to. I'm going to stick with version 0.0.1, and we're going to hit create. Now, what this does, if you've ever played around with a brick, this should feel somewhat familiar, but a lot more powerful. This Pro Code Editor allows you to have access to all the tooling that you used to have to do offline as it relates to app development, but right here inside of the browser. So on the left-hand side, the first thing I want you to do is click on that manifest.json. It's really just a blank file. If you've got experience with these, you understand how persnickety they are. We've put a really nice GUI on here, which we're going to use right now, so we don't have to worry about the nuances of the manifest so much. But I'm going to have you double click on manifest.json up here in the header. Should turn it from italics to straight up text. That just means it's going to persist as we navigate around through some of these different tabs. First thing we're going to do, these settings up here in general are just fine. We're going to add a data set. So let's click that Add Data Set button, and we're going to grab that sample data that we just deployed. Sample data for webinar. I'm going to choose that data set, and I'm going to give it a name. Now, I'm going to call mine dataset 0, all lowercase and the number 0. You can call it whatever you want to, but this is one of those times where I would encourage you to follow along, because I cheated. I know that I've already referenced it as dataset 0 in the other code that we're going to look at in a second. So if you do change it, just note what you change it to. I'm going to go with dataset 0. Then I'm going to hit sync fields. This is an optional thing. You don't have to do it this way. But what this does is this pulls in all the fields that exist in your data set, all the columns. I'm going to take these bottom 2 off. I'm not worried about batch last run or batch ID. And now you can see that some of these column aliases have got a red line under them. Remember, we're in a pro code environment here, and one thing that pro code doesn't like is spaces or special characters. So what we're going to do is in these aliases, we're just going to remove the spaces. I'm going to be careful not to make any other changes other than removing the spaces. But in each of those, I'm going to click through there, and I'm going to remove the spaces. So we've got our column name as it appears in the dataset on the left, and we've got its alias on the right, which is the same as the column name, just missing spaces. Next thing I'm going to do is down here, this collections. We talked about AppDB, right, and how that's an important part of this. AppDB leverages collections. So we're going to add a collection here, and you likely don't have any. I'm going to hit Create New, and I'm going to give this a name, Collection for Webinar. Again, call it whatever you want to. This is less important that you follow me exactly right here, because we're going to copy paste this anyways. We don't need to worry about any start data. So after we've given it a name, again, no spaces or anything here, this little helper message will tell you that. We hit Create Collection, and you can see that we've now got a collection ID and a collection name. I'm going to go ahead and select that collection name, and I'm just going to copy it to my clipboard. I would encourage you to do the same, because we're going to need to paste that in just a second. Once we've done that, click on the JS file over here called app.js.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah.
Sorry, we had a question in the comments, so I want to make sure we got to it before we got too deep into the session.
Sure. What do we got?
Marianne, apologies. Where do we go to DL the data set, to download the data set?
Yeah. Marianne, sorry, we missed you there. I'll show you real quick. Let me throw open a new tab here. So what you want to do is go to the data center, hit Connect Data, Connectors, search for Domo Dimensions. And then once this list populates, it should be the first one. It's called ACE Webinar Sample Project Data. Don't want to hold everybody up, so you may want to just remember that and come back and watch the replay, because it's going to take you a second to grab that. But that's where you can find the data set. Oh, and Artie answered that also for me. Thank you, Artie. Michael, your question about setting off the workflow 0.04 credits. I'm going to put a pin in the credit thing. I would encourage you to ask your account team that question. They can do lots of different things, so it all depends on how we configure this. But what we're going to do here is not even actually going to involve a workflow. So, Eddie, we good? Should we continue?
Yeah, sorry, let's continue.
Yes.
Sorry, yes.
Okay, cool.
Continue.
All right. So back here, we've clicked on app.js. I'm going to double click on app.js in the header there again, just so if I move around between these files, they both stay. And the first thing I'm going to have you do is come down to line 30. You'll see this variable cast, variable collection name equals, and inside of those quotes, I'm going to paste that collection name that I just copied a moment ago. So here on the manifest.json, collection name, if you didn't add it to your clipboard, go ahead and copy that. And in the app.js, we're going to paste it there on line 30. Now, I want to direct your attention to line 18. If we look over here on the right-hand side, we have a visual representation of our app as it stands. So we can see we've got some columns here. What I draw your attention to is this checkbox column. The name for that is declared on line 18. So I'm going to rename this. This app we're going to build today is going to allow for approvals. So I'm going to say submit decision. So what I'm going to call mine, You can really call it whatever you want, but I'm going to put submit decision in there again inside of the quotes. And if I hit save all, which I just did, you can see that now your app, just like mine, should have a new heading over there. Instead of column checkbox, it should have whatever it was that you chose to put in there. Now, we've got some comments in the code that I would encourage you to explore around with after our call, but I want to draw your attention to this variable called data object. This variable, it's an array of objects, and each object, like line 22 is an object, represents a column in your table over here on the right. So we cheated a little bit, right? I have access to create the template and create the data set. So this is already pre-populated with most of what we want. So we're not gonna edit any of these, except we're going to replace progress, right? I don't want to worry about progress. We're going to come down to line 26. And instead of progress here, this is where we're going to have the approval status. So I'm going to write approval status with a capital A and a capital S, no spaces for the name, right? So I'm going to replace line 26. I'm going to replace progress with approval status. And then the label, what I have here is progress. I'm going to put approval status again, but I'm going to include a space this time. The label is the user-friendly thing that shows up at the top of the table. The name is the code-friendly thing that can't have any spaces in it. So we've got approval status and label, and then we need to add a field for a note, right? I want to show you how to have an open text field on here where a user can put a note. So we're going to go to the end of line 26. You can see my cursor right here. Actually, I'm going to have you copy the contents of line 26. Go ahead and add that to the clipboard. We're going to go to the end of line 26. We're going to hit return. So inside of our data object array, we're creating a new line, and we're going to paste what we just copied, which is that approval status name and label. We're going to change the name to note. I'm going to go with a capital N, O-T-E. And it is important, again, if you're comfortable with this, deviate from our path. If you're not, follow along with me explicitly. And the label, I'm going to call this note. Now, we're going to go ahead and hit save. And I want to explain to you real quick exactly what we're doing. This data object variable is used in a couple of ways, right? It's used to create our header on our table here. You can see that we've now got approval status and note. It's also used to inform the content that's written to AppDB, right? So it's going to capture all these values and it's going to write them to AppDB. I'm going to have you scroll down the code just a little bit here. And we're going to look at line 44. We've got another variable. This one is called data column name, and it is an array. This time it's an array of strings. You can see it includes project ID, project name, completion date, priority of progress. I'm going to have you delete progress out of there. So we're going to remove line 49. And what this data column name array is used for is it's used in the query where we query our data set. So we're going to query our data set and we're going to ask it for these 4 columns, right? So just for fun at this point, I'm going to hit save all, and you can see that now our app over here on the right-hand side populated with a bunch of data, right? Pretty cool. So our query worked against our data set. It grabbed those 4 columns. You'll see approval status and note are empty, right? We don't know what those are, and they actually don't exist in our data at this point. That's why we didn't ask the data set to pull them, and that's why they're not represented here in our app. Now we're going to fix that though. We're gonna show you how to enable some user editable fields, and in doing that, we're going to scroll down, and again, there's comments that go through all of this, but we're going to scroll down to line 136. You can see here on line 136, we're declaring a constant called selector1 options, just like we looked at before. That is an array. And if these things don't mean anything to you, that's okay. I'm still wrapping my head around it all. I'm not an engineer. But what I'm going to have you do is we're going to replace type 1. So we want to keep the quotes. We're going to replace type 1 with awaiting review. I'm going to include a space in there because this is what's going to populate the values in my dropdown. So I'm going to say awaiting review. I'm going to replace type 2 with approved. I'm going to replace type 3 with denied. This is one area where if you want to, you can deviate away from what I'm doing and you can put whatever you want to in there. You could put, Manny, Mo, and Jack, whatever. This is just going to populate your drop down that we see down here on line 158. So once we've got line 136, we've got that array updated with the values we want to appear in our approval status dropdown. I'm going to have you slide your way down to this switch, where it says switch here on 153. This is a switch statement. We're not going to get into the nuances of what that is, but what I want to have you do is on line 155, we're going to replace the word dropdown with approval status. So what we're saying here is like, hey, in the case where the field, the column is approval status, we want to render a dropdown that displays the values from that array we just looked at, selector1 options, right? So we're going to replace line 155. We're going to put approval status inside of the quotes. And we're also going to, on line 158, you can see ARR bracket I bracket dot column 2. We're going to replace column 2 with approval status. All right. Now, just so you can see the progress you've made, we're going to go ahead and hit save all. And now you'll see that we've got this approval status. Pretty cool. It says awaiting review on everything. If we click on any of these, you can see the values that you put in your array. Your selector1 options up here on line 136 is what appears here. If I want to add or remove anything from there, I can just adjust that line 136 and they'll immediately appear. Now, you'll notice they all say awaiting review, right? The way this is written is it is going to display this 0 right here, means it's going to display the first option in that list, right? So you want your default value in this case to be the first option, which is why we had awaiting review there. And you could change that. You could grab a different index position and move that, but we're going to leave it at 0. I just wanted to explain what's going on, but it's going to look for there to be an existing approval status first in the data, which there is not because that value doesn't exist yet. And since there's not, then we're going to display the first value in that list. I want to have you slide down to the next case in our switch statement here. And we've got this one for open text. This is where we're going to put our note. So capital N-O-T-E, the case where the column is note. Essentially, what we're telling this is that we just want to render an open box that takes an input of text, right? I'm going to go ahead and hit save all. And you'll see now note is populated with a text box. And I can type stuff in here. Pretty cool. We've got some sample code in here as well for open number. If you wanted to do an open number, the idea here is you want to have more or less editable fields. You can copy these cases and you can paste as many of those as you want to, changing the value in here to whatever column you want to manipulate, and then it's going to do whatever your code here tells you. So we've given you an example of rendering a dropdown, rendering an open text field, and rendering an open number. If you're new to this, I would encourage you to lean on your favorite AI assistant if you need help with this stuff. Obviously, we on the ACE team are here and happy to help. And you certainly have got some friends that know a thing or two about writing code inside your organization. So now that we've got this, there's just a couple of last little things that we need to do.
Hey, Dan, before you move on here,
Yes.
Strat here says, how did your data populate? I must have missed that part.
How did your data populate? Yeah, no problem. So I'm going to slide back up here to the top of the code. Right here on line 54, this is where we execute a query against the data set, and we query the data set for all the columns that exist inside of this array, right? And remember, these column names reference the alias that you stipulated on the manifest, right? So in our data set, it's project space ID. We can't deal with spaces in the code, so we aliased it as project ID. And in our array here for data column name, we've said we want project ID. So we stipulated the columns we wanted to query here. And this variable here includes the query, and buried here in the code is where the actual call for the query takes place. But if you populate this data column name variable appropriately with these same 4 columns, if you're following along with us exactly, then you should just hit the save button and you should see your data there. If you're not, there's likely a typographical error somewhere. You could open up your developer tools, and it would give you a little pointer as to where the query is failing, or you can just go, and pick apart, ensuring that your names match the aliases in there.
Gotcha.
I don't know if that's helpful or not. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's tons of people helping in the chat as well, which is why I love our community. So they're on it. Thanks, Dan. You can move on.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, the last thing that we're going to do really quick is we're going to scroll quite a ways down our code here, and there's a lot of things going on in this app. So, but what I want to do is I want to draw your attention to this line 355. This is where you can add any new data elements into the AppDB collection that don't exist in your data set today. So we're going to replace line 355 with approval status, no spaces in there, capital A, capital S, approval status. And we're going to pass it a null value. We don't need to say it's updated. You'll use this, like if you look at that first example that I showed you where we kicked off the workflow, right? I had all sorts of stuff added in here that the app knows. Like I was grabbing the environmental variable for the user that submitted it. I was passing that in here. Lots of different things that you can do here. But we're just going to add new row, approval status equals, and then we're going to pass an empty string there. And then we've got to look really quickly at lines 360 through 367. This handles our drop downs, right? The elements that don't exist in our data yet. We're going to need to edit our index position. So this line 360, const drop down index position, we're going to change drop down index position to approval status index position. And don't worry about it graying out like that and getting the little light bulb. We're going to use it. And this value where it says equals 1, this is where we want to stipulate using zero-based counting, which is annoying for me as a non-engineer, but we use zero-based counting to indicate which column contains the approval status. So if we look here, project ID is column 0, project name is column 1, completion date column 2, priority is column 3, approval status is column 4. So I'm going to replace this value here with the number 4, and then we're going to do a little bit of copying and or renaming here, I should say. This const drop down, we're going to call this approval status. this drop-down index position, we're going to replace with approval status index position. Those are on line 361. And then on line 362, we're going to replace 3 occurrences of drop-down with approval status. Now, again, the casing is important here, right? We've got a capital A, we've got a capital S, and we're going to do that for the 3 occurrences of drop-down that exist on line 362. Approval status. All right. Once we've done that, we're going to slide down to line 364, and we're going to do the same thing, but this time we're going to do it for the note. So I'm going to replace open text. That was kind of our placeholder, the word note. So we've got note index position. Our index position on this one is 5, right? It's 1 to the right of our approval status, so it's position 5. And then our const note. So we're going to replace open text with note there. And then on line 366, again, we're going to replace open text with the word note. And then we're going to do that 3 more times on line 367. So open text becomes note with a capital N. We've got some comments in here that hopefully will explain this if it doesn't mean a lot to you. But once we've done that, we're going to go ahead and hit Save All, and we can see we've got our app here. Now, what I want to have you do, right, at this point, our app's done. It actually functions. We're going to see it work here really quickly. I'm going to take this first project for overhold. You got to love mock-generated data. And I'm going to give it an approval status of approved, and I'm going to give it a note of testing my cool new app. You can put whatever you want to in there. The way this app is written is the fields that you've edited that you haven't submitted yet show up as red. So if you were going through and doing a lot of these, right, you could understand which ones you'd edited. The fields that you've made changes to show up as yellow. And I'm going to go ahead and select that Submit Decision button. Checkbox on that row, which, turn that row white because I've got it selected. I'm going to scroll back over here to the left. You could also just move this delineating line to make your app bigger. But I'm going to hit this Submit button. And you'll notice the app it quickly goes from submitting to submitted, and the row turned green. Super cool. Hopefully you all had that same success. What we want to do now is I'm going to have you close the app Pro Code Editor. So we're going to click this X in the upper right-hand corner. And here in the asset library on the left, you can see this hard disk looking icon that says AppDB Admin. I'm going to have you click on that, and you should see your collection. I called mine Collection for Webinar. I don't know what you called yours. But if we click on there, we can see that we've got that data in our AppDB collection. So we can see here under content, we've got overhold, status of approved, and a note of testing my cool new app. Now, to take this even further, if we go to the data center that you're likely more familiar with, that you know and love, you should have a data set that matches your collection name with some underscores and the word AppDB. You can rename those if you want. But if we look at that and we look at data, we can see that we have a row of data that shows we've got an approval status of approved, a note testing my cool new app, and we've got our data there, which is very cool. So now if you remember back to the architecture that we talked about having some data, having some AppDB data, and joining that up in a dataset view. We're going to do that now. And there's a cool little trick I'm going to show you here that you may not know of dataset views, but we're going to do it by opening the sample data for webinar. That's what I called it, the dataset that has all our project data. When you go to do this with your real data, you're going to go to your actual dataset, and you're going to open with Views Explorer. So up here in the upper right corner, open with Views Explorer, and you'll see your data here. What we're going to do is on this left-hand side where all the columns are shown, we're going to select data sets. We're going to add a join. So add join. And the data set that I'm going to grab, it should be right at the top of the list, is that AppDB data set. So we're going to choose that, auto-generated from AppDB service. I'm going to choose that data set. And what we're going to do is we're going to join on the project ID. Now, a key tenet of doing this, right, is that you do need to have a primary key, as with any join. So when you go to apply it to your real-world scenario, you'll want to think through that. But we've got our project ID, and then I'm going to go ahead and select my columns. And I'm going to grab approval status note, and then just for fun, we'll include these 5 at the bottom, which are all related to AppDB. These are things that will be really helpful for understanding who approved it, when they approved it, if you want to build some additional cards around that. I'm not going to grab these top 4 columns because they already exist over here, right? Just going to go ahead and hit save. And you can see we've got our columns for our data set. And then over here on the right, we have all of our new AppDB columns, including our approval status and our note. Now, one thing that's really cool, and this will allow us to, I helped a client one time, and they wanted to just come through and review a bunch of records. And they just wanted to note when they were reviewed, and they wanted ones they had already reviewed to fall off of that list, and ones that had yet to be reviewed to show up on there. We're going to do that here right now. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to go to this approval status column. You'll notice that for every row except this first one, the approval status is null, right? Because in our source data, we didn't have an approval status. We only have an approval status for the one record that we approved and wrote to AppDB, right? So what we're going to do on this approval status column, and this is the little trick that I was going to tell you about. If we click on the 3 dots up here, we've got the ability to rename it and whatnot, but we've got this really cool remap nulls feature, right? And I'm going to say remap nulls, and I'm going to put needs review. Remember what you put here, right? This is one of those things where if you deviate, that's fine. We're gonna reference this in just a second when we jump back in our code, but I'm going to put needs review with a space, and I'm going to hit that checkbox, and you can see now all of the approval status fields are updated to needs review except for our top one that is approved. So what that's going to do is every time there's a null column in approval status, it's going to say needs review. So when you're thinking about your real production data and you're having new records written to it all the time, this view is always going to show needs review in that approval status field. So we're going to save as, and I'm view of sample data for webinar is great for me. You can rename it if you want to, but I'm going to hit save, and that is going to create our data set view. Right? If we go to data, we can see that we've got our view here, our approval statuses are all there. So that's great. Now that we've got our view, we're going to jump back into our app for just a moment. We're almost done. You guys have done great. We're going to go back to the asset library. Again, that's found under the More menu. Instead of hitting that Pro Code Editor button, we see we've got an app asset here now, and I'm going to have you click on the 3 dots and hit Edit Design. That's going to open that Pro Code App Editor back up again. It looks like we just did a release or something, which so I said we had a new version. So now we're back in here, right? And we've got our app. Now, what I want you to do is we need to point the app to our new dataset view. So we're going to go to the manifest.json, and where we've got our dataset, I don't want you to hit the X like we did before. Just click on this little hard disk, select an existing dataset, and grab the view we just created, view of sample data for webinar. Go ahead and choose that dataset. I'm going to hit sync fields again. Why does it tell me there's no fields to sync? Let's hit save. It could be that if you're encountering that, let's just hit refresh. It could be that view didn't have any data just yet. Let's look at our manifest.json. There, our sync fields button is populated. I don't know what happened there. Just for kicks, I'm going to select it again. Still no sync fields. Hold on here. If you're encountering that also, let's just peer over here at our data set and make sure that our data set has some rows. It does. All right, so I don't know what I'm experiencing. I'm going to do a hard refresh of Domo. Could have some weird cache thing going on. But it wouldn't be a proper demo without some bumps. I'm going to go back into the asset library. I'm going to go to Edit Design. And on this manifest, we're going to try it again. We're going to grab our view of sample. Yeah, it's telling me this data set has no data. Odd. All right. We're going to get around that, though, because we know there's data there. I'm going to go back to our app.js. Inside of our query here, in the data column name, we're going to add those two new columns that we created, right? So I'm going to put a comma on the end of line 48. We're going to grab approval status, because that is a column that exists in our data set now. And we're going to add another new line. We're going to grab the note. We don't actually need the note, but we're going to do it anyways. Now, what we want to do here, in this case, we only want to display the records that haven't been reviewed or approved, right? So you'll see here on line 54, there's a variable called filter. It's commented out. I want to have you uncomment that filter. And we're going to filter it on approval status, right? Equals needs review. So that's why when I said, hey, whatever you map your nulls to, we only want to show the ones that have a null value for approval status, which is now mapped to needs review, right? I've also done you a favor and added another row for the query that has the filter injected in there. So I'm going to have you go to line 56. We're going to add 2 backslashes at the beginning to comment that one out. And we're going to uncomment 57. All right. We're going to save all. I don't know if whatever little gremlin I've been dealing with on my manifest has resolved itself yet. Let's grab, this data set has no data. I am stumped as to why that's happening. I'm going to sign out of my instance. I'm going to sign back in. Can't fathom what's going on there, but appreciate you all being understanding of the fact that we're doing this in real time, and hopefully nobody else is having this issue. Yeah, see our view of sample data for webinar. Let's just edit our view really quick. It's here, it's clean, it's populated with data. Needs review, this all looks good. We'll save and close. Going to go back to my asset library. Going to edit my design. We're gonna just, I am gonna just remove this. We're gonna add a data set. Okay, now it realizes that it's got 300 rows. Great. Hopefully you didn't have to go through that little dance with me. If you did, hopefully you were able to follow along. We're going to alias this again as dataset 0. We're going to hit sync fields, right? So this is going to call all of our fields into from our new wider data set, right? We're going to clean up our aliases by removing our spaces. And I'm going to just clear out this document ID, batch ID created by these ones at the bottom. We don't need those. So now that we've got our manifest updated, the manifest is where we instruct the app what assets in Domo it can interact with. Once I hit save all, our app should populate with data again. There we go. Perfect. So we're going to close this. Our our change to our app is done, right? I just want to review really quick. In app.js, what we did here is we told it to add a filter of approval status equals needs review, and we adjusted our query to include that filter, right? So this is only going to now, the app is only going to show records where that approval status equals needs review. So we're going to close out of here, and we're going to create a new card. So from this screen right here, you can do it. Another way you can do it is anywhere you are, you go to build a new card, you default to selecting existing data. If you select more, there is an option for enterprise app. You can get there that way, but we're just going to hit create new card. Up here in the top left, I'm going to call it Dan's Really Cool App. I'm going to select this full page box. And if you're new to app wiring screens, down here in the bottom is where you would choose the data sets and the different assets that your app interfaces with. Since we stipulated data sets and collections on the manifest that exist in this instance, that mapping is already done, but I'm going to go ahead and hit save and finish. And now here is our app. I'm going to open this up full screen, Dan's Really Cool App. And I'm going to go ahead and approve a couple of these suckers. We're going to approve Vento Sanzop, whatever that is. We're going to deny this one. We're going to approve this one. We're going to say Demo 1, Demo 2, and Demo 3. You can go ahead and select all three of those and hit submit. And just like you saw in our demo, really quickly, those three fall off our list because they've been approved, right? If we go look at our data set, we can see, let's look at this really quick, that they were approved, denied, approved. And we've got metadata from AppDB to understand which user, that's my user ID, created that. You can see when they did that. You can see who modified it last. So you got some really cool things you can build other reports around or other content around reporting on that. So hopefully y'all were able to follow along there. I know it was a lot. I've got a couple of little wrap-up items here, and then we can look at the comments. Let's switch screen here really quick, and let's look back at our lovely PowerPoint. Should still be open here. All right, so build recap, right? We built an app to enrich a data set. 2 thumbs up, double pat on the back, whatever you want to do. That app added 2 new fields to the data, right? We added an approval status, we added a note. We also have the ability to note who approved it and when based on that metadata that shows up in AppDB. Products we used, Pro Code Editor, we used an app template, we used AppDB. I put here in the grayed out section down here below, Cloud Amplifier, Workflows, and ETL. The example that we built here together today didn't use any of those, but the demonstrations that I showed you did, and they make this that much more powerful. When you have a workflow involved to incorporate some approval steps before the records are changed, or you're writing back to a source data system via Cloud Amplifier or a write back connector, manipulating that through an ETL, there's some really neat things that you can do. So in conclusion, what I would ask you to do from here is insert your data and your business problem, right? You can go back to that manifest, you can grab your own data set, you can make the adjustments to those variables. It'll take you a few minutes the first time if you're unfamiliar with code, but don't let it scare you. You can go in and do that. If you need some help, obviously we're here for you. I lean on AI all the time for coding. Incorporate a workflow for additional action, right? If you want to have some approval steps in there, ask questions here in the community, here in the chat, whatever we can do to help you. And I would love it. Nothing would make me happier than if a bunch of you guys sent in notes telling me about all the cool things that you built with this. We've probably got, I don't know, it looks like maybe you weren't seeing my PowerPoint there, so I apologize about that. We caught Eddie. I put Eddie to sleep. So this was our,
I should stop multitasking is the problem. I get to chatting with some folks. Yeah, that's my fault. We're back.
all good, man. They got to look at me stare at the screen for minutes. No big deal. This was the build recap slide that we looked at where I mentioned the things in gray. And this was what I was just talking about, what's next. So nothing would make me happier than if you all hopped on and told me about all the cool things that you did with that app. So that's it. We've got, I know there's a lot of commentary here that I haven't read, but thank you for the time. I know we're right on the hour. Happy to hang out for a few. If we've got any, how do we subscribe to the ACE? Eddie, how do we get a section in the community?
Yeah, you know what?
Where we can pipe ACE stuff in. Do you know a guy?
It's weird. I think we have a spot in the community called the events page where we post all of these that are happening, whether we do our ACE training series, whether we're doing our live streams or community meetups, Domopalooza announcements. All of those things are happening at community-forums.domo.com. So check those out. Also, Dan has been diving into a little Reddit these days, correct?
I'm a Redditor. I think I'm Domo Dan H.
On Reddit.
I can't tell who the heck anybody is on a Reddit, but I think I'm u/Domo Dan H. I will get better at Reddit. And yeah, I'm on there. I'm on Reddit now.
Yeah, I love it. We obviously are throwing a lot of this content directly back to you on whatever channel you came to watch. So most of you are watching on StreamYard. So just come back to that link. As soon as I end the stream should be uploaded and ready for you to watch on demand or to share with anybody out there that would love to watch it in your organizations. Lots of folks here have tons of stuff to say. For you, Dan, great demo. Excellent demo. Dan the demo guy is what I'm gonna start coining it. Great one. Good job. Amazing demo, Dan. They're just, people are singing your praises in the chat.
The next one you're going to hear from on our team, on my team, is Riley. If you don't know Riley Morgan, I don't know the date. I don't have it in front of me, but it's in like 2-3 weeks. We're going to come at you. And that one's super cool. We're going to show you how to use a new service we incorporated into our AI tooling to extract text from images. So it's got all sorts of cool application around, pulling information out of an invoice. I don't know exactly which sample he's going to use in the webinar, but you'll get to hear from Riley. He's going to mix things up for you. So it's not just the Dan show, and you won't want to miss that one. So we'll make sure that we get really good at letting you all know when those are going to occur. But yeah, watch for them. We're trying to shout from the rooftops and share this stuff as far and wide as we can.
Yeah, I love it. Obviously, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Please share this out with your networks. Thank you for joining us, whether you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or on our dedicated StreamYard page where we've been posting this. I absolutely am thrilled that Dan and team have come to us with these very technical walkthroughs, kind of holding our hands as we walk through these really cool use cases in Domo. It's been a really good time. We hope they continue in the new year and whatever comes up next. We hope to catch you guys on the next one. Obviously, be checking our events page, hanging out on Reddit, doing all the things where we're at, Slacks, community instances, all the things where we're.
Can I interrupt you real quick?
You guys have access. Yeah, go for it, Dan.
I just want to say real quick for Strat, we took care of edit submitted responses. If you look through that code, search for the term is editable. There's a commented out line. So if you noticed in the first example I showed you, only certain ones were editable, right? Once it had been submitted for review, it wasn't. There is an uncommented line that says is editable equals true. You comment that one out, and right above it, there's a line that you can uncomment, where you can say, hey, it's editable if, and you can set the parameters. So if this column equals this value or whatever. So that's already taken care of. And right at the top, for those of you that I know there was a question about workflow too, there's a flag right at the top. Include workflow, true, false. Right now it's set to false. If you set it to true, then you just need to stipulate a workflow on the manifest, and it will pass all that same content it sends to AppDB straight to the workflow. So I'll figure out a way to do some more educational content around that. But we tried to cover all those bases in that template. And if you've got feedback, holler at us. Sorry to interrupt you, Eddie.
No worries. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Thank you for joining another Domo ACE session coming at you very soon. Be sure to be checking all of those resources. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.